My name's Luke Pecoraro, and I'm the Director of Archaeological Research here at George Washington's Mount Vernon. And today I'm going to speak with you about an object that we recovered from George Washington's South Grove Midden, which was a large trash-filled feature that was found just behind the family kitchen. And this object has recently gone on display in our Museum and Education Center. It's a small piece, and it's a silver object, which is very unique, and it had some interesting markings on it. It took several years of dogged archaeological research to figure out what exactly this piece was, but we are very pleased with the end results. And it turns out that this silver artifact was a fragment of a sword scabbard that George Washington likely carried and maybe even carried during the Revolutionary War. So the object in question is about the same size as a modern quarter, and as you can see, it looks like it's been cut in half. On the finished edge, there's some scalloping, and then right in the center, there's this nice kind of flowing line that's engraved into the piece of silver, and then two small loops that follow that. Now, looking at some of the objects that we have in our collection that have George Washington's monogrammed G and W initials on them, we were able to have a look at this and determine that this more than likely was the representation of the G and the W engraved in this piece of silver. Now, what exactly it went to was a little bit of a mystery. We started looking at what silver objects would have been applied and affixed to, and we found an example from the Smithsonian's collection of a sword that was crafted by sword and silversmith John Bailey that came out of the Fishkill, New York area in the 1770s. Now, the Smithsonian's example had the sword scabbard collar, which is what we determined this piece to be, intact. Not George Washington's initials, but enough of it to tell that perhaps George Washington had a sword that was crafted by John Bailey. Turning to the documentary record, we found out that in 1778, George Washington requested a cutting sword be made for him, and it's highly likely that this piece could have come from John Bailey's workshop because at the time George Washington was actively campaigning in the Northeast. So archaeologically, our sword scabbard piece comes from a layer in the South Grove Midden that dates to the first quarter of the 19th century. Now, this is a very interesting period of time in Mount Vernon's history because George Washington has passed away. Ownership of the estate conveys to Martha Washington. She passes in 1802, and then ownership of the estate goes to George Washington's nephew, Bushrod Washington. So what our interpretation is with this particular object was that it was a piece that broke off of a sword scabbard that was either deliberately discarded at the time and we don't have the remains of it left, or that it was an object that was kicking around the house at the time when there was a period of transition on the estate. So based on the documentary record and the archaeological evidence, we can say that this piece likely dates to 1778, likely was a piece that made it through the Revolutionary War with George Washington, and then was discarded after George Washington's death. We encourage you to come out and see the sword scabbard collar, which is now currently on display in an exhibit called The Swords of George Washington, which will be in our Museum and Education Center.